The photograph arrived at my desk on a Tuesday morning, its edges frayed and yellowed, the emulsion cracked in a spiderweb pattern that spoke of a century's worth of handling, storage in attic trunks, migrations across continents, and the careless touch of hands that never understood what they held. It was dated 1892, though no inscription confirmed this, only the telltale signs embedded in the image itself, the cut of the jackets, the architecture of a wrought iron balcony barely visible in the background, the pose of the subjects frozen in that peculiar rigidity that characterized early photographic exposures when a single breath could ruin minutes of careful preparation. I held it under the lamp in my study and felt the weight of a question I had asked myself 1,000 times before. What if we could step through the frame, not as observers, but as participants, breathing the same air, hearing the same sounds, feeling the same cobblestones beneath our feet? This time, I would not settle for imagination alone. I would conscript 5 different artificial intelligences, each with its own architecture, its own biases, its own strange genius, and I would ask them to do the impossible, to resurrect a single moment from 1892, to rebuild it from fragments, to give flesh to shadows. The first AI I consulted was trained on millions of historical documents, census records, city directories, shipping manifests, and newspapers printed on presses that still used lead type. I fed it the photograph and asked a simple question: where was this taken? Within seconds, it returned an answer that felt both authoritative and unnervingly precise. The balcony, it said, matched the architectural style of a specific district in Vienna, where the Ringstrasse had just been completed, transforming the medieval city into a monument of imperial ambition. The clothing suggested a middle-class family, perhaps a bank clerk or a minor government official, someone who could afford a photographer's services but who would never be invited to the salons of the aristocracy. The time of day, the AI inferred from the angle of shadows, was late afternoon, probably autumn, when the light takes on that golden, melancholic quality that painters spend their lives trying to capture. But the AI did not stop there. It cross-referenced weather reports from Viennese archives and told me that in the autumn of 1892, the city experienced an unusually warm September, followed by a sudden cold snap in early October that killed the last of the summer flowers and sent citizens scrambling for their winter coats. It was a detail I had not asked for, but it was precisely the kind of detail that transforms a photograph from a static relic into a breathing moment. The second AI specialized in sonic reconstruction. I had read about its application in archaeological digs, where researchers used it to recreate the acoustics of ancient amphitheaters, to hear how a Greek tragedy might have sounded to an audience 2,000 years dead. I gave it the photograph and asked, what did this moment sound like? The AI requested additional data: the location, the time of year, the approximate time of day. And then it began to build. It started with the baseline hum of the city, the distant clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer 3 streets away, the cry of a street vendor selling roasted chestnuts, his voice rising and falling in a cadence that had been passed down through generations. It added the specific: the rustle of the woman's skirts as she shifted her weight, the creak of the balcony's ironwork settling in the cooling air, the faint wheeze of the man's breath. He was a smoker, the AI suggested, based on the slight discoloration visible on his mustache in the photograph. Then came the layer I had not anticipated, the sound of children playing in a courtyard below, their laughter echoing off the stone walls, and beneath it all, the low, almost subsonic rumble of the city's new electric tram system, a technology so recent that many Viennese still crossed themselves when they heard it approach, as if it were a mechanical devil. The third AI was a master of material culture, trained on textile samples, fashion plates, and the inventories of long-defunct department stores. I asked it to tell me about the clothes in the photograph, and it delivered a lecture that would have made a museum curator weep with envy. The woman's dress, it explained, was made of silk taffeta, a fabric that in 1892 was still expensive enough to signify status, but common enough among the middle class that it no longer screamed nouveau riche. The color, which appeared as a dark gray in the monochrome photograph, was almost certainly a deep plum or burgundy, shades that were fashionable that year and that would not show the coal dust that perpetually drifted through the city's air. The cut of the bodice indicated the work of a skilled dressmaker, though not a haute couture house. The seams were precise, but there was none of the excessive ornamentation that marked the truly wealthy. The man's suit was wool, likely imported from England, tailored in the sack coat style that had replaced the older frock coats among the professional classes. His collar was starched, a detail that spoke volumes. Maintaining a crisp collar in 1892 required servants or a wife willing to spend hours with a hot iron, and it signaled a man who cared about appearances, who understood that in a city like Vienna, where everyone watched everyone else, a wrinkled collar could mean the difference between respect and ridicule. The fourth AI was a chemist, or at least it thought like one. It analyzed the photograph's emulsion, the grain structure of the paper, the fading patterns, and from these clues, it reverse-engineered the sensory environment of the moment. The air, it told me, would have been thick with the smell of coal smoke, the signature scent of every European city in the late 19th century, a smell so pervasive that contemporary writers rarely mentioned it, the same way we rarely mention the smell of gasoline today. But there were other smells too, the sharp tang of horse manure, which in Vienna was collected by municipal workers every morning, but which still managed to perfume the streets by afternoon, the yeasty aroma of bread baking in the building's ground-floor bakery, and faintly, the chemical reek of the photographer's developing fluids, which would have clung to his clothes and hands, a smell that the subjects would have noticed and politely ignored. The AI also detected traces of lavender water on the woman, a common perfume among the middle class, used to mask the fact that full baths were a weekly luxury, not a daily routine. The fifth AI was the strangest of all, a neural network designed to predict human emotion from facial micro-expressions, posture, and contextual clues. I asked it to tell me what the people in the photograph were feeling, and it paused, a genuine pause, as if it were considering the ethics of its answer. Then it spoke. The woman, it said, was anxious. Not about the photograph itself, but about something else, something that had happened earlier that day, or perhaps something she anticipated happening later. Her left hand, barely visible in the frame, was clenched into a fist, a gesture she was trying to hide from the camera. The man was impatient, eager for the session to end, though he was doing his best to conceal it. His jaw was tight, his shoulders slightly raised, the classic posture of someone enduring a necessary discomfort. But there was more. The AI detected a third presence in the photograph, a child standing just out of frame, visible only as a blurred hand reaching toward the woman's skirt. The child, it suggested, was sick. Not dangerously so, but enough to worry the mother, enough to make her wonder if she should have stayed home instead of honoring the appointment with the photographer. This was speculation, the AI admitted, but it was speculation grounded in the statistical reality of 1892, when childhood illness was a constant shadow, when every cough could be the beginning of something fatal. I sat with these 5 reconstructions, these fragments of a moment, and I tried to weave them into a single narrative. I imagined the family climbing the stairs to the photographer's studio, the woman's hand tight on her daughter's wrist, the man calculating the cost of the session against his monthly salary. I imagined them standing on that balcony, the photographer fussing with his camera, the smell of chemicals mixing with the scent of roasting chestnuts from the street below. I imagined the moment the shutter opened, the long seconds of stillness, the silent prayer that no one would move, that the image would be sharp, that this moment would be preserved. And then I imagined them leaving, walking back down into the city, into the noise and the smoke and the relentless forward march of a world that had no idea what was coming. The wars, the revolutions, the collapse of empires, the birth of technologies that would make even this miraculous act of photography seem quaint. They could not know that, more than a century later, a stranger would hold their image and ask 5 machines to bring them back to life, to make them breathe again, if only in words. But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the true power of these technologies is not that they resurrect the past, but that they remind us of what we have always known, that every moment, no matter how ordinary, is worth saving, worth studying, worth mourning when it slips away.